What happens when justice refuses to drown? When a story the world tried to forget comes rising back from the depths of the sea. 15 years after the Gaza Flotilla Raid, the waves are shifting again. Spain is now preparing to move the case to the International Criminal Court. And what began as a mission of mercy could soon ignite a legal storm unlike any before. This is Core Truth Documentaries, where silence meets exposure, and every hidden truth finds its voice. The year was 2010. A fleet of 6 civilian ships set sail across the Mediterranean, carrying not weapons, but hope. Their goal was simple, yet defiant: break Israel's naval blockade on Gaza and deliver humanitarian aid to a besieged population. On board were activists, doctors, journalists, people from 40 nations, united by a single cause: to bring life where there was restriction. They called it the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, the largest ship among them. Mabi Mamara carried more than 600 passengers. Among them were peace activists, elderly volunteers, and religious leaders. There were chants of solidarity, flags of unity, and prayers for a safe arrival. But as dawn approached on May 31st, something changed. From the sky came the sound of rotors, black helicopters descending in the dark. Within moments, chaos erupted. Israeli commandos boarded the ships, and the Mediterranean turned into a scene of blood and confusion. 9 civilians were killed that morning. Dozens were wounded, and the mission that began with peace became a global outrage. Israel called it self-defense. Activists called it murder. The world called it complicated. In the following days, protests erupted across the globe, from Istanbul to London, from Kuala Lumpur to Madrid. But the political machinery quickly began to bury the story. Reports conflicted, footage was edited, and the world's attention moved on. Yet, deep within that chaos, a seed of justice was planted. Spain, among other nations, began collecting testimonies. Lawyers documented every image, every timeline, every survivor's voice. It took years, but that seed has grown again. Now, 15 years later, it threatens to challenge the power that silenced it, because Spain is ready to take the flotilla case to the International Criminal Court. In the early hours of May 31st, 2010, the Freedom Flotilla was just 72 nautical miles from Gaza's coast, still in international waters. Communications were cut. Witnesses say Israeli naval forces issued radio warnings, demanding the ships turn around. The activists refused. Then came the assault. From speedboats and helicopters, heavily armed soldiers boarded the ships. They used live ammunition, stun grenades, and tear gas. Eyewitnesses describe passengers using only sticks, hoses, and bare hands to defend themselves. Within minutes, the decks were soaked in blood. The Mavi Marmara became a 9 activists were killed instantly. A 10th later died of his wounds. Dozens were injured, hundreds detained. Israel seized all footage recorded by passengers, releasing only selected clips to international media. The official narrative portrayed the activists as aggressors, but independent footage smuggled out by journalists told another story of civilians under fire, of chaos and confusion, of commands lost in translation. The world demanded answers. The United Nations Human Rights Council launched an inquiry. The results were damning. The UN found evidence suggesting Israel's actions were clearly unlawful, and that civilians were summarily executed. Turkey, whose citizens made up most of the victims, demanded international prosecution. Lawsuits were filed in multiple countries, but most stalled under diplomatic pressure. Still, families refused to give up. For them, justice wasn't a political argument. It was a human one. Mothers who lost sons on the flotilla still keep their photos framed beside Quranic verses. They say the sea may have taken their loved ones, but not the truth. As years passed, the story faded from headlines. Governments changed, files gathered dust, but survivors, and a small network of lawyers in Spain, never stopped digging. They believed that international law, though slow, could still be awakened. And today, that persistence has brought the world to a crossroads, because Spain is no longer just watching, it is acting. Madrid 2025, inside Spain's National Court. Something historic is unfolding. A group of Spanish lawyers, backed by human rights organizations, have reopened the case of the Gaza Freedom Flotilla. Their goal: to take Israel's actions to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. Their argument is simple, yet explosive. They claim that the flotilla raid was not a single act of violence, but part of a systematic policy of repression against civilians. They argue that what happened on the Mavi Marmara constitutes war crimes under Article 8 of the Rome Statute. The ICC has jurisdiction over crimes against humanity, but only if a state fails to prosecute its own. Spain's legal team says Israel's internal investigations were inadequate and biased. No commander, no soldier, no policymaker has ever faced genuine accountability. This case could redefine international law. If the ICC accepts Spain's submission, It opens the door for global jurisdiction, meaning any country could prosecute acts of aggression committed in international waters. Israel, of course, has rejected the move, calling it politically motivated. The US has expressed concerns about the precedent, but human rights experts call it a breakthrough. For the first time, a European nation is challenging the doctrine of impunity surrounding Israel's naval actions. In private meetings, diplomats admit the implications are enormous. If Spain succeeds, other countries, Saudi, Africa, Malaysia, Turkey, may follow. It could set off a wave of international accountability not seen since the post-war tribunals of the 20th century. But as the case gains momentum, strange things begin to happen. Documents vanish from archives, certain witnesses go silent, and, in the shadows, an unknown figure begins asking questions, tracing financial and political links between law firms, governments, and global corporations. They call him the Senator. No one knows his full name, but leaks suggest he's gathering evidence that connects the flotilla raid, international lobbying, and covert pressure on courts. His files, sources say, could expose far more than a military operation. They could expose how justice itself is influenced, and while Spain prepares its ICC submission, the Senator's shadow grows larger. The world has changed its rhythm since Spain announced its move to take the Gaza Flotilla Raid before the International Criminal Court. Echoes of that decision have traveled farther than the sound of any gun or wave. What began as a legal motion has become a test of conscience, a question the entire planet must now answer. How far will we go for justice when the victims are forgotten and the truth is inconvenient? Newsrooms break the story before dawn. Cameras flash across Madrid's marble halls as Spain's foreign minister signs the referral. Outside, reporters shout. Microphones clash, and one headline dominates global screens. Spain challenges the silence. Within hours, diplomatic cables fly between embassies like sparks from a live wire. Israel calls the act judicial aggression. The United States labels it counterproductive. France urges restraint and further consultation, but in the streets from Istanbul to Johannesburg, people begin to chant a single word. Finally, a BBC correspondent describes the mood. It feels as if a door long sealed has suddenly cracked open, and the light, though faint, is real. Social networks ignite. Activists post grainy footage of the raid, now reframed through the lens of law, not propaganda. Each clip becomes a piece of living evidence. In Tel Aviv, government officials assemble in urgency. A midnight meeting begins, voices sharp, faces pale under fluorescent light. One minister warns, if this case is allowed, next time Int'l come for us all. Legal teams mobilize. Lobbyists reach out to allies in Washington and London, urging pressure on Spain. But something unexpected happens. Some European diplomats quietly refuse. After years of political choreography, they simply look away and stay silent. A silence that speaks louder than any protest. Meanwhile, journalists uncover that Spain's decision was not spontaneous. It followed months of internal debate, legal preparation, and moral reckoning after new testimonies surfaced. Testimonies that the world had never heard. 3. The people's echo across continents. Ordinary citizens respond before their leaders do. In Madrid, university students march with paper boats painted white, symbolizing the flotilla. In Ankara, crowds carry banners reading "Justice sails again." In Gaza, children gather on rooftops, flying kites shaped like ships. A Gazan teacher tells a visiting reporter, "They sent aid to us when the world looked away. Now the world looks again because of them." The emotional weight is undeniable. In cafes, mosques, churches, and social media spaces, the question becomes not whether Spain is right, but why it took so long. Weeks later, the International Criminal Court in The Hague becomes the eye of the storm. A gray morning sky looms over the building as Spain's legal delegation steps inside. Cameras flash, pens click, translators whisper. The courtroom feels both sacred and tense, like a cathedral built for truth, yet haunted by politics. Spain's chief prosecutor, his voice is measured but fierce. "Johannes, this case is not about revenge. It is about recognition. Recognition that in international waters, human dignity cannot drown." For a moment, the room holds its breath. Could just listen expressionless. Every word echoes against marble in memory. Outside, protesters chant in dozens of languages. Some hold photos of the dead. Others carry model ships with names painted in blue. The sea of voices blends into one, demanding that the court remember. But power rarely yields quietly. Behind the scenes, diplomatic cables reveal intense pressure. Several Western governments warn of destabilizing consequences. A leaked memo from a NATO policy group cautions that the case could undermine cooperative security frameworks. In plain language, justice may interfere with business as usual. Media campaigns emerge overnight. Opinion pieces argue that Spain is politicizing human rights. Talk shows host former officials who repeat the same line. The flotilla was a provocation. Yet audiences seem less convinced this time. The old narratives sound rehearsed, brittle, outdated. Independent journalists counter with documentaries, live threads, and eyewitness interviews. The world's information war reignites, but this time, truth has an audience hungry to listen. In the midst of the chaos, a digital leak encrypted files bearing the now famous initials. The data includes satellite images, intercepted coordinates, and financial trails linking private contractors to surveillance during the raid. No one claims the leak, but its accuracy shakes investigators. A Spanish judge orders the documents sealed pending verification, but copies circulate among journalists within hours. Every newsroom asks the same question. Who is SM? Rumors spiral. Some say SM stands for Senator Mo, the mysterious figure rumored to have investigated the flotilla independently years ago. Others believe it's an alias for a collective of whistleblowers. Either way, the legend of the senator grows. Global organizations take sides. Human Rights Watch praises Spain's courage. Amnesty International calls it a historic opportunity to reaffirm the universality of law. The Arab League issues a statement of full support. Meanwhile, in Washington, senior advisors quietly warn that U.S. cooperation with the ICC could be reevaluated. But on the streets, the people are ahead of their politicians. Artists paint murals of the Mavi Marmara, not as a tragedy, but as a symbol of defiance. Podcasts dissect maritime law in layman's terms. TikTok creators post emotional monologues titled, "We are the flotilla." The digital age has turned resistance into rhythm. Even within Israel, some voices of dissent emerge. A retired naval officer tells an independent outlet, "We followed orders, but history will judge the orders themselves." That sentence alone trends for a week. Madrid resists all pressure. In Parliament. The Prime Minister declares, "We act not against a nation, but against impunity." Applause fills the chamber. Opposition parties, for once, not in agreement. Spain's moral stance becomes a mirror for Europe, a reminder that democracy without accountability is only theater. As the hearings progress, Spanish investigators submit thousands of pages of evidence, including eyewitness testimonies from multiple countries. One of them describes the moment commandos boarded the ship. They came from the dark, shouting in a language we didn't understand. Then the light went red. The courtroom falls silent. No one breathes. Away from the grand speeches and headlines, individual lives continue to carry the memory. In Gaza, a young woman named Layla hosts community workshops explaining international law to teenagers. If they know the rules, she says, maybe they can dream beyond them. In Istanbul, a survivor of the raid gives his first public interview in a decade. His hands shake as he speaks, but his eyes are steady. Justice is slow, but so was the tide that night. It still reached the shore. Their stories humanize the statistics, anchoring the documentary's emotional core. Midway through the hearings, the ICC announces a short recess. Observers expect routine procedure, but speculation rises when certain judges request classified evidence review in private. Journalists outside the court whisper that new material has arrived, possibly connected to the SM files. Late that night, an investigative reporter in The Hague receives an unmarked envelope. Inside, a handwritten note and a flash drive. The note reads, "Only for truth to float. Someone must dive." The footage on the drive shows pre-raid aerial surveillance, clearly not taken by any of the flotilla's cameras. Metadata places the drone within NATO jurisdiction. If true, the case is no longer about one nation's actions, but about complicity at a continental scale. As rumors spread, embassies tighten security. Private meetings fill the calendars of defense ministers. Unofficially, some countries begin contingency planning, diplomatic shielding, press strategies, emergency narratives. But Spain does not flinch. The foreign minister gives an interview to El País. "If justice collapses under pressure, then we have built our world on sand." That line becomes the documentary's refrain, repeated softly over visuals of the Mediterranean. Waves rolling against the hulls of forgotten ships. Weeks turn into months. The hearings continue, and something changes in the global tone. A subtle shift from cynicism to reflection. Even skeptics admit that Spain's persistence has revived debate about international accountability. Universities host panels titled, "Can Small Nations Challenge the Powerful?" Faith leaders hold interfaith prayers for peace and justice. Musicians compose songs, blending Spanish guitar with Palestinian oud, bridging cultures through empathy. The flotilla, once a tragedy, is transforming into a movement. And then, the mystery deepens. In midsummer, a new leak surfaces. It contains minutes from confidential EU meetings about the flotilla investigation. At the bottom of the document appears a signature. Senator M. No one knows how it got there. Analysts trace the metadata to a location on the outskirts of Int'l. Local journalists rush there, finding only an abandoned farmhouse filled with old newspapers, maps of the Mediterranean, and a wall pinned with photos of ships. One photograph stands out, the Mavi Marmara, circled in red, with a single handwritten note. Truth floats. The myth becomes a man, or maybe a message. Every mention of the senator amplifies suspense. Was he a diplomat turned whistleblower? A collective alias used by investigators? Or something even deeper? A symbol created to keep the story alive. As the ICC prepares its interim findings, several governments attempt quiet diplomacy to stop the momentum. Economic deals are dangled, aid packages are promised. But Madrid remains resolute. Meanwhile, the Israeli legal team submits a lengthy rebuttal, arguing that the court lacks jurisdiction. They insist that internal investigations already addressed the incident. Spain counters with data proving the opposite, showing uninvestigated deaths, missing recordings, and altered timestamps. The clash becomes not only legal, but philosophical. Can power investigate itself? Can truth exist without courage? Finally, the ICC announces a preliminary ruling. It will proceed to the next stage of formal investigation. Gasps echo through the courtroom. It's not a verdict. Not yet. But it's the first real step toward accountability in 15 years. Crowds outside erupt in cheers. People cry, hug, pray. In Gaza, fireworks light the night sky. In Madrid, church bells ring. For the first time, the victims' families feel that the world is listening. But victory feels fragile. A light flickering and strong wind. Just as the celebrations begin, an encrypted message appears on several journalists' screens simultaneously. It's signed again. The message reads, "The sea remembers more than the court will ever hear. The next wave is coming." Moments later, all copies of the message vanish from servers. Cyberforensics trace fragments to multiple countries, including one linked to a former senator known for investigating covert maritime networks. But confirmation is impossible. The mystery deepens. Media speculate wildly. Some claim the senator possesses classified intelligence that could expose collaboration between defense firms and political figures across continents. Others dismiss it as myth, yet every government mentioned suddenly increases digital security. Something is stirring beneath the surface. As dusk falls over the Mediterranean, cameras capture waves glinting gold under a fading sun. A narrator's voice, calm, reflective, resolute, rises above the surf. From Gaza's shores to Spain's courts, the tide of truth moves slowly, but it never stops. Every witness, every document, every whispered name adds weight to the current. And somewhere, perhaps in the shadows of diplomacy or the silence of exile, the senator watches, waiting for the world to be ready. The music swells deep strings, slow drums, the sound of water hitting steel. This is Core Truth Documentaries. Facts have voices, courage has consequences, and this story, he's not over.